She showed up to Thanksgiving with not only a slew of food, but also a big tub of yarn. Beautiful. Here's hoping we have at least a ball or two left. My mindful and mindless knits are almost going to be swapping places a little bit. It was very cool to show up to Thanksgiving and see someone else wearing one of the knits that I had gifted for them. It's so heavy. What would you make with this type of yarn? Wow.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. I am feeling really good about just having a minute to sit down and relax and chat about my knitting. As I'm filming today, it's actually Friday, the day right after Thanksgiving here in the US. So one more time, happy Thanksgiving to those of you who celebrate. I know that this is a big sales weekend for yarn and all of that stuff. So I had one little thing I wanted to let you know about as far as like yarn sale department, and it does go along with what I'm wearing today. So why don't we kind of segue in like that? And then otherwise, I just have a few WIPs to chat with you about. I'm thinking we're going to be very chill. I have a little acquisition. I'll save a little story time for the end. So why don't you go ahead and get cozy and join me for this week's podcast episode. What I'm wearing right now is the newly released, as of today, Artemisia sweater by Emma Mayer of Emma's Knits. I was one of the test knitters for this sweater, and for it, we used the Mohair by Canard Boucle, and then I used a different yarn for my trims. The one that you're looking at is Woolfolk Tinned, but for the test knit, we did receive 50% off of that Mohair by Canard yarn, and so that was what I used. And as of today, the pattern has just come out. Emma did mention on her Instagram that this design will be 20% off on Ravelry until Sunday, which is December 1st. So I know so many of you were interested in it. It's a really great basic raglan sweater, but the yarn is what really makes it, being this boucle. And since I finished mine, I promise you this is my most worn sweater ever. I find it to be so warm and cozy, but it's extremely lightweight because of the boucle, and I'm just so obsessed with it. And because of that, when Emma offered to compensate her test knitters with a free pattern of hers, I asked if I could just share that free pattern with one of you, because I know so many of you were interested in knitting this sweater, but I've also knit some of Emma's other designs, and I have some more of them on my queue. So I just wanted to make sure that I could spread the love with you all. And so on the screen right here is the winner of that little giveaway. If this is your name, please send me an email. It's down in the description box below at akanoraknits@gmail.com. And if you could just send me an email, then we will make sure that Emma gets you your free pattern. However, everyone does get 20% off of the new design until Sunday. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. And like I said, a little yarn thing along with that. I had mentioned when I knit this that I love it so much. I'd like to knit another one. And I really want one in a bright color. So far, the boucle yarns that I've seen that have the most color selection, I've seen from Knit Picks, but for the longest time, they were out of stock in all of their fun colors. However, as of today, I did see that Knit Picks does have those fun colors in their boucle restocked, and they have 30% off of their website for this like Black Friday weekend. So I think I'll be ordering some of that today as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared that if that sale is still going on, if you were interested in knitting this. I also do absolutely love this Mohair by Canard boucle. Like I said, I've worn it so much and it's been wearing so well. I'm really, really happy with it. So I just wanted to make sure that I threw all of that out there since I know so many people were interested in this. And quickly, just one more time, I wanted to reiterate the fact that this is the first design of Emma's that she's going to be releasing using numbered sizing. And that was based off of the conversation that we had here in the comment section. So I just feel really excited and grateful to have been a part of this test knit and to have played a role that I did and that we did together. I really appreciate Emma hearing us out, and I think it's just so cool. So I'd love to support designers who listen to their community, and I just think it's a really awesome thing. So make sure you go check that out. And otherwise, I think it's time that we chat about some WIPs. So why don't we go ahead and dive on in? I think today I'd like to go a little bit out of order talking about my WIPs. And so let's start with the one that has been on my needles actually for the least amount of time. And I'm just going to breeze through this one because it is the favorite fingerless mittens pattern by Pairs Well with Knitting. This is the second pair that I am knitting up. These are going to be my kind of main gift knits this season. I have a few people that I'm gifting to. So I've knit up one pair before. This is the second one. I am using a thrifted yarn held with a gifted yarn. And so these are just very fun for me. It is a fingerless mitten pattern that also does not have a like thumb trunk, if you will, which I really have been enjoying and will be knitting myself a pair of these once I finish the gift knitting ones that I'm doing. But I just feel like for mobility's sake, it's really nice to have the thumb area totally exposed. So I'm really enjoying that. From everything that I learned in my first pair, I made just a couple of little changes to the second pair, which is that I'm knitting them in the size medium, and I gave myself a little bit more space. I want to say that I wound up doing 2 additional rows to what's in the pattern for that thumb hole. I just found that for comfort, I enjoyed having a little bit more room there. And then that way too, if someone wanted to wear these over a pair of gloves, they would just have a little bit more wiggle room in that department. It's a super simple, just stockinette little tube. It's a rolled hem up here where you cast on. And then I liked to knit them just a little bit further down the wrist so they could kind of tuck up into a coat. And then for this pair, I think I'm going to try a sewn bind off just to see if that'll give me more stretch, because the first pair that I had done, I definitely did my bind off way too tight. But these are something that I'm just having fun with, knitting up when I can. I've been knitting them on 4.5mm needles, never did a gauge swatch or anything like that, but I've just been following that size for the worsted medium in the pattern. For this pair, the bright blue main color that you see is this Christian de Falbe Chandos wool yarn in this really beautiful sort of aqua-y, but like kind of a cobalt blue. And then I thought it was really fun to actually pair it with the same mohair that I had used for the last pair that I made of these. And this is a Barocco Ariel silk mohair, and it's a variegated yarn that has all sorts of different shades of very pastel colors. But there's everything from a white to a baby pink, a lavender, this really goldenrod mustard color, a little sagey or grassy green in there, and then the littlest bits of like sky blue and periwinkle. And I just love the way that it kind of plays with the otherwise very bright color of the blue, and it kind of chills that out a little bit. I just thought that these were really fun, and especially for gift knits, I'm having a lot of fun playing with color for these. So like I said, I just have maybe another inch to do on the wrist here, and then I'll start the second one for those. But super enjoying just having these when my brain is totally fried, as it can be around the holiday season, and they just make the best little scrappy gift knits. So those are the favorite fingerless mittens by Pairs Well with Knitting. I'm not keeping track of how long they've been on the needles because I know that they could knit up in a day if you needed to. I'm just kind of working on them as I can and trying to prioritize my other kind of main WIPs. So that's that. Okay, so I do have 2 garments for myself that are kind of the main priority WIPs right now, and I would like to try them both on today. So I think what we should do is just a quick little try it on tubing and chat session while I move both projects over to the try it on tubing, and then I can hang them on my hanger as well as try them on. So I will do a little story time during that segment. How is that? Let us grab some try it on tubing. All right, I've got my try it on tubing. Let us go ahead and start some try it on tubing and chat. All right, while I'm moving this over, I thought that I could tell you that kind of also along the lines of what I'm wearing today. This was the sweater that I also wore for Thanksgiving yesterday. And you know what? The weather was so crummy yesterday around here that we really didn't get too many photos because there was just so many people in the house for Thanksgiving, and it was just crummy outside, so there wasn't a lot of photo opportunity. However, I did get a photo with my aunt who is in town for the holiday, and she if you remember earlier this year, I had knit up the Netty scarf by Lily Kate France. I had knit up the small version for myself, and then I had made this really beautiful burnt orange silk version for my aunt. And so she actually wore hers to Thanksgiving, which was so fun. And I was able to get a photo with her, so you can see it was very cool to show up to Thanksgiving and see someone else wearing one of the knits that I had gifted for them. You'll also see that I wore this boucle sweater, but I decided to dress it up a little bit by pairing it with a matching satin skirt. And I am so thrilled with the way that outfit turned out. And I think it's just such a good way to show that these knits can be so versatile. I wear this just about every day with a pair of jeans and can kind of dress it up or down in a casual way, but to really just spruce things up a little bit, I thought pairing it with something really nice and shiny like this satin skirt would just make it a lot more formal. Not that we do anything formal for the holidays, but it was a really fun way to wear it a little bit differently, and I'm really glad that came out exactly the way that I had pictured it would. Also, when my aunt came into town, she gifted me the earrings that I'm wearing today. And I think that they are so ironic because they're actually moth wings. And I told her, I was like, I just kind of love the idea of wearing moth wing earrings while wearing a wool sweater. There's something so ironic about that to me that I really enjoy. Now, she is not one of my knitting aunts, but she is someone who very much appreciates the knitting and just handcrafted goods. And she has a friend who owns a yarn shop that she chats with all about her knitting niece. So I thought that I would just share it with you if you are in the North Carolina, Asheville area. I'll put a photo on the screen here of the shop. I thought that the logo was actually so cute, and I would honestly really like a t-shirt with this logo on it because I just really like it. But I know that my aunt is always there and chatting with the ladies inside. So I wanted to make sure that I just share them because they're also, supporting the channel from afar and even just in kind of continuing the conversation about knitting. It's just really cool to me. So I wanted to make sure that I let you guys know about them if you're looking for a yarn shop in the Asheville area. Okay, that's one project on the Try It On tubing. All right, so let's get the other one going. Now, I will also share that in last week's podcast episode, I was about to go give my sister her poet's cardigan. Since then, she's received it. She loves it. She sent me some photos of her wearing it in Canada, which was so exciting. It looks so good on her, and I'm so in love with it, and I love that she loves it too. She also, if you were curious, very much enjoyed herself at the Taylor Swift concert. And yeah, that was just a really cool thing to be able to gift her that sweater, and I know that she really enjoys it, and it fits, thank God. Now, also at Thanksgiving, I was hanging out with my knitting and crocheting aunts. So the one who gifted the yarn for those Taylor Swift cardigans, that is my crocheting aunt. I just dropped some stitches, so wait a Okay, crisis averted. So she is my crocheting aunt, and she showed up to Thanksgiving with not only a slew of food, but also a big tub of yarn. She is my aunt who has like the ultimate craft room. And she had gone through a phase where she thought that she would be making these felted purses and selling them. And lo and behold, things didn't go exactly according to plan. So while cleaning out her craft room, she put together this tub of yarns that I will show you at the end of the podcast as our acquisition this week. But it was a very fun surprise to see this big tub of yarn come through Thanksgiving. I actually have already kind of started brewing up some ideas for some of these yarns in my head. I think that some of them would be the perfect thing to pair with some other yarn that I thrifted recently to finally knit up that Stitches sweater by Veronica Lindbergh, Kotova Kika. So I'm really excited to see those coming through. Every time I do this, I drop stitches, and there's always people who ask me why I don't just use a cord extender and add another cord to my knitting and try things on that way. And it's such a valid question. And I always consider the same thing when this happens to me. But my only issue with doing that, when I'm trying a garment on for length or for fit, which is, those are usually the reasons why I'm trying something on, right? When you try it on the actual knitting needle cable instead of the try it on tubing, I just find that the knitting needle cables tend to be a little more structured, and they wind up kind of they kind of flare the fabric out a little bit. Or by having the needles on there, it will still weigh the project down a little bit. And I'm sure that these are just minor little things, but I feel like personally, I get the most accurate representation of how something's going to look when it's done, when I do take the time to switch it over to the try it on tubing instead. So that's the only reason why I wind up doing this. If I'm just checking to see if I'm ready to join in the round under the arm, and it's like a little bit more of a casual thing, then I will do that kind of off camera. But I do feel like on camera, to get the best representation of how something's going to fit, I get the most accurate look by doing it this way. Anyway, with that, we have 2 projects on the Try It On Tubing, so we can end this week's segment of Try It On Tubing and chat. Now I'm going to go back to in order of what's been on the needles the longest. So why don't we start with my 2024 holiday dress, which is the Grayling Sweater by Magdalena Parker of Knitonomy, which I am knitting out of Knit Picks Wonder Fluff in the colorway Espresso Heather, and I'm knitting mine in the size 4. I'll go ahead and pop her onto Helena the Hanger. All right. So this is probably the most dramatic change of my projects over the past week. Well, I guess actually since the last time you saw it, because I took a little break from this to finish my sister's Poets cardigan. But this is designed to be an oversized, all over cabled sweater, and I'm actually making it into a long dress to hopefully wear it for Christmas or at some other later holiday event, something. I have just recently joined under the arms. So this is a drop shoulder style sweater. You start with the back panel, and then she gives you the option in the pattern if you want to just cast on the shoulder stitches and sew it to the back, which inevitably gives you a more defined shoulder seam, and in her words, makes it look more store-bought. Or if you would like to just pick up the stitches on the shoulders from that back panel, I wound up just picking up the stitches because of the yarn choice that I'm using. I knew that you would never really see that seam anyway. So it just seemed a lot easier to go in and pick up the stitches. And that was what I had done. And then you're just working your way down to under the arm, at which point this gets joined in the round. And now I have a ton of knitting to go before I will be finishing off the hem. Of course, we're going to add sleeves. And I'm going to wait longer than usual. Typically, at this point where we've kind of just joined in the round, what I would do is actually work until I'm done with the ball of yarn that I'm using, and then go back and cast on for the neckline so that I can get the most accurate representation of how this is going to fit for the length of the sleeves as well as the body of the sweater. But because I'm knitting this into a longer dress, I'm just not 100% sure yet what I'm looking for with the neckline. It's written to have a folded over collar, which the more that I'm looking at other inspiration for this dress, I am actually, I think, leaning towards that right now. But I also know that I have considered doing more of a turtleneck or like a funnel neck type collar. So I'm going to wait until I have more body to this, basically probably until it's actually a dress length, so that I can get a better sense of, how much am I going to feel swallowed up by it in the first place? And that's probably going to help me determine if I want to keep going up, 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 or if I want to keep it a little bit more. I think it would look more casual to keep it as the folded collar. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I think it might need that once we have this mega long dress. Now, anytime I was knitting flat, so basically everything that was happening before joining in the round, I was finding that that first purl stitch in between cables was winding up really loose. And so I followed a tutorial that told me to wrap the yarn around your needle clockwise instead of counterclockwise on that first purl stitch, and then in the when you work your way back, you would knit that stitch through the back loop to kind of turn it. As I got to join, and I found that that worked out really well to kind of just cinch up that first purl stitch. Once I got to working in the round, I kept doing it without really thinking, but you're no longer getting that opportunity to kind of correct it on the wrong side. And I have yet to actually look up what I'm supposed to be doing. I just kind of kept going, and I do see a little bit of a difference from when I was knitting flat to knitting in the round in that first purl stitch. So I should look up what I'm actually supposed to do now to keep that first stitch just kind of more tidy. It just winds up kind of creating like these elongated purl stitches, and it looks a little more sloppy. So if you have a particular technique that you like for knitting in the round and tidying up that first purl stitch, I'd love it if you would share that with me, because you could definitely help streamline this process here for my own. But otherwise, I actually never tried this on when it came time to join in the round. I've just been following the pattern verbatim. So I thought we could just check in super quickly and try it on today. As this is supposed to be a pretty generous, oversized fit, I am just going to toss it on over my Artemisia sweater right now. Beautiful. Wow. It's always fun the first time you get to try something on. So, of course, as this does block out, I am fully anticipating it stretching out even a bit more than it is, which means that these shoulders will definitely be sitting a little bit lower, and there is going to be a generous amount of ease in the body. In the pattern, she mentions that you should choose a size that's about 20 centimeters wider than your bust circumference. When I was choosing a size for this, I was looking not only at my bust circumference, but also the widest part of my body, which is my, hips, kind of butt area. And I was making sure that whichever size I chose, I was still going to get a bit of ease around that area, just because I knew that had I gone strictly based off of my bust, there was a chance that I wasn't going to get the fit I would like across my whole body. So just keep that in mind, that if you're planning to knit a sweater into a dress like I am here, you want to pay attention to more than just the bust measurement. Unless you're looking for something that has negative ease there, I really wanted this to be an oversized, just kind of comfy, big sweater dress. So it was important to me to make sure that I didn't necessarily need 20 centimeters. What does that come out to? So 20 centimeters is a little less than 8 inches. So I didn't necessarily need 8 inches of positive ease around my hips, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be zero ease. I also always include my measurements in the description box below. So, again, if you're looking to kind of do a similar thing, you can always reference the size that I'm knitting with my own measurements down there. But let me stand up so we can get a better look at this. Now, I know that typically when we're talking about knitting cables, you're always looking for yarn that provides a lot of stitch definition. It's usually the general rule that you want to knit cables or texture using lighter colors so that you can see all of the work that you've put into it. But I'm really, really fond of the way that this dark color in a fuzzier yarn. This is a blown yarn, the Wonder Fluff. I really love the way that it just diffuses these otherwise very, very bold cables. On their own, these cables are so defined and wide and really clearly cabled. And so I think that toning them down with a darker color and this just fuzzier texture, for me, it creates an even more like luxurious look, because it creates just a texture that takes you a little second longer to see, but it's also by no means hiding the effort that I put into it. That being said, too, if you've never knit cables before and it's something that intimidates you, I do recommend finding a cable pattern that has a very routine pattern to it, where all of these cables, the actual cable twist is always happening on the same row. And what that means is that for all of the rows in between where you see the actual stitches crossing over one another, which is how cables are made, you're just knitting in pattern, knitting the knits, purling the purls. So this actually, now that I'm in the round, is a super mindless knitting project. I can now just take this out wherever I go. I use a row counter and I just know that row 18 is my cable row. And other than that, I knit what I see. And super, super easy to follow. So if that's something that you've been wary of when it comes to knitting cables, try to look for other patterns that you see all of those cables going the same way. So they're all twisting in the same direction and they're not like mirrored. And then all of those cables happening at the same time. Those would be my tips if you're a beginner cable knitter and you're feeling it's a little bit daunting for you. That's kind of just what makes it a little one less thing to worry about while you're knitting it up. Anyway, super happy with this. I don't know how much longer we're going to have to go on this project. I have had this on the needles for 46 days today, which also reminds me, I get a lot of questions about how I count the amount of time my projects have been on the needles. And it's literally a free app. It's called Days Countdown. It's literally called Countdown and Up. The icon is a blue icon that says days on it, and it was a free app. And you can literally just put in the name of the pattern and set the date that you started it, and then it just starts counting daily. I really like having it on my iPad so that I can just personally know how long something's been on the needles, but I've had a lot of people ask about it too. The only other thing I'll say about this is so far I've been really enjoying knitting with the Wonder Fluff yarn. I do feel like I'm breezing through these balls of yarn. So I have to double check just how much of it I have. I know it's always a little tricky when you try to figure out how much yarn you're going to need for a project that it's not actually included in the pattern. So in this case, knitting it so much longer than what the pattern recommends. So there's a bit of math involved. but hopefully I got that right. And if not, I will pivot and that's okay. So that is the Grayling Sweater by Magdalena Parker Knitonomy. Been on the needles for 46 days today. And now for the last WIP that I have going. This is my Yoga Winter Sweater by Naringa Rook. And I am knitting this raglan sweater in Barocco Ultra Wool in the colorway Bear. It's very on theme here. I'm enjoying my browns at the moment. This garment I did not do a gauge swatch for, but I'm knitting it in the size extra large on 5mm needles. And I would like to try it on today because I do think that I'm about at the point where I'm ready to split for the split hem on this sweater, which really is the defining characteristic of this pattern. So I wanted to try this on today just to make sure that we are close enough to the top of my jeans here. I know that this superwash wool is going to grow in blocking, and so I don't want to go too long before I split for the front and back, but I also believe that I am just about at the amount of rows that she states in the pattern. I didn't do a gauge swatch, so that is kind of irrelevant information, but figured that would be a good enough time to try it on. I will say that someone did just validate my strange beginning of round being on the front of this sweater, and they said that they also have knit this pattern and the beginning of round does in fact wind up on the front of the turtleneck. So I'm glad that that was not just something that was in my head, or I was really thinking maybe I made a mistake along the way, but it sounds like that just is how it is, not the end of the world. It's just an interesting thing that I found out. And so let's go ahead and put this sweater on. Again, I'm just going to throw it on over my Artemisia to see if we're ready to split for the front and the back. Well, perfect. It looks like I've stopped at the exact right time. I definitely would not want to go any further, especially knowing that this is going to block out a little bit. So I maybe even could have stopped knitting in the round a little bit sooner. I don't think that that's the end of the world. And so now I need to see in the pattern what are the next steps for splitting for the front and the back, this split hem, which features these decreases that kind of cause it to come in towards the center on the front and the back. And it creates this really pretty kind of openings on the sides where your hips kind of poke out a little bit. I just find it to be a really interesting shape, especially for such a simple sweater. And I think especially in this color, to be able to see the jeans kind of around it would look really nice. But I also think this would look really beautiful with that satin skirt that I wore with my Artemisia sweater for Thanksgiving. I think it would look really pretty to see that underneath this sweater, so not tucking it in. I just think that'd be a really sophisticated and fun look. So, really glad that I tried this on today because definitely would not want to go any further than we are right now. And that's probably where I will be focusing my attention next, just to make sure that this is kind of getting on the right track for some back and forth knitting. I will also say that I was due for a new winter coat this year, like a proper snow coat winter coat. And I've just been loving this color so much that I actually found a winter coat that is about this kind of rich dark brown color, and I would love it so much. If I am to have extra yarn at the end of this project, I think it would be a great option to make like a little cuff, or what are those called? A collar? Is that what it is? Almost a dicky, something that I could just wear under my winter coat more than anything to block the collar of my actual winter coat from my makeup, and something that I could just wash then as needed instead of having to deal with it on my coat itself. But definitely if I have yarn left over, it is already allocated for a little accessories project. So here's hoping we have at least a ball or two left. But as of today, this project has been on my needles for 32 days. And with that, those are all of the WIPs I have going at the moment. as I am kind of looking at things, I realize that my mindful and mindless knits are almost going to be swapping places a little bit because the Grayling sweater is now in a state where it's just going to be that repeated knitting in the round, only cabling on that one row, and then just knitting what you see the rest, which does make it a lot more mindless. Probably not totally TV knitting, but something that I'm more able to have just kind of on the go out and about. Whereas the yoga winter sweater is going to be now knitting flat and decreasing on the sides. So there's just going to be a little bit more kind of paying attention that has to happen. The only part about that that's going to remain more mindless for now will be knitting the sleeves. So I could probably consider that my new mindless knitting. But I'm also kind of looking back at my fall knitting plans as those are coming to an end and realizing that I really didn't even make a dent in those. So I might just look around a little bit and see if there was another mindless knit that I should maybe cast on in the next week, just to have something that truly is that TV sort of knitting. I wish that I could do those fingerless mittens mindlessly, but I'm using magic loop to knit them still, and I just don't find that to be something that I can really do without paying attention to it. So I don't know if that's just a me thing. Anyway, I will just quickly show you the yarns that my aunt had gifted me. I'm certainly not going to pull them all out, but I'm going to grab the few highlights that, like I said, I was kind of thinking for that Stitches sweater by Veronica Lindbergh. This is literally what showed up to Thanksgiving. It's so heavy. But for me, the standouts are these. There's even more colorways in here. I'm just grabbing these ones off of the top. And this is Kramer Yarns Mosh Chunky. It says 60% New Zealand wool, 40% domestic wool. And there's just like the most fun colors here that I think would be great for some pops of color in that Stitches sweater, as it's not something that I plan to wear every day. I think I'd love it to be just really fun and creative. And I mean, really, that is the epitome of that sweater anyway. So I think that these would be a great option for the color work in that sweater. And I recently thrifted some similar yarn. I haven't compared them yet, but I think that the what was the name of that yarn? It was very similar where it's that single ply kind of unspun type yarn, but it was in a gray color and then a cream. So I thought those would make for perfect base yarns, and then these as the accent colors on the Stitches sweater. Don't you think so? Heck, I could probably even make two of them. If you have any ideas for what to do with all of the leftover here, I would love to know. I also think some more fingerless mittens would be great in this kind of yarn. We also have some of this really fun ribbon yarn that I've never worked with, but whenever I see this stuff, it always intrigues me, and I would just love to know, what would you make with this type of yarn where it's literally like a fabric, a flat ribbon fabric, and I just love the color of this one. So if you have a recommendation, I'd love to know what you would do with this. And then the last one that I just thought I would show you, if you remember all the way back to episode 1 of the podcast, I had talked about the first time that my aunts taught me how to knit when I'm guessing I was maybe 10 or 12, and I did not pick up on it at all. Nothing stuck with me, but I blame the yarn. And that is the Lion Brand homespun yarn. And I remember having a hat and scarf out of this yarn that my aunt had actually made for me and I think my mom. I think my mom still has that scarf, but I do think it would be really funny to have a redemption round with this yarn since I had such a miserable time knitting it up as a kid, because it's like the kind of yarn where it's squiggled around a little thread and it's just impossible to see your stitches when you're trying to actually learn how to knit. But I do think that this would be something fun to knit up as a little accessory, just as my redemption round from being a kid and trying to knit. Anyway, I just thought it would be fun to share that with you. Obviously, I'm super fortunate to have my crafty aunts who indulge in all of the yardy goodness with me and share what they're not using. That's so cool. So I feel very lucky. But anyway, I think that that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this little bit more just relaxed and chatty episode with the holidays. I feel like my brain is just mush. So I was looking forward to sitting down and just kind of recalibrating, right? Seeing what I have and don't have. I'm also really excited because after I get this podcast up and out for you, I'm going to be decorating for Christmas, which I'm so excited about. It's kind of my favorite thing is being able to transform this space for the different seasons, and Christmas is definitely a favorite of mine. I also am trying to come up with ways to just spread a little extra Christmas love and cheer this season. So we'll be getting into the details of that next week, but I'm just feeling really good about this magical time of year and being able to share it with all of you who are here week after week. So thank you so much for being those people. Don't forget to check out Emma's new pattern, the Artemisia sweater. I will make sure to link it below. If you were the giveaway winner, please do send me an email. If I don't hear from you by next week, then I will be choosing a new winner. So please do email me if you see your name on the screen here. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, I would so appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe and ring the bell, you're going to be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can always count on there being a Saturday morning podcast every Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. With that, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys, bye!